Time to pull up a chair. We've got another great story for you today in the rLounge. How far will a jealous person go? Well, today in the rLounge, let's let a very peculiar death do the talking. Up first, a cousin with some jealousy-fueled antics. My cousin's jealousy blew up in her face. Throwaway spare account. I like the inbox on my main to be nice and peaceful. My 28 male cousin, Mary, 22 female, grew to be an extremely jealous person in her teens. We've all hoped she would grow out of it, but she hasn't. She refuses to address it. When I proposed to my husband, Sean, a couple years ago, Mary threw a fit. She wanted to be the first to get married between the two of us. She deserved it. She didn't even have a boyfriend. Because Sean and I chose to have a small personal wedding, we were able to use money set aside for us to buy a home and pay off half the mortgage. Cue another tantrum from Mary, despite the fact that there is money set aside for her too, including from our grandparents and Aunt Miranda, who chose not to have children. I think you can get the picture. If I have something Mary doesn't, she wants it. If I accomplish something before her, it's not fair. It doesn't matter if she's younger than me by 6 years and I would naturally reach some goals before her. There's just no logic in her tantrums. This brings us to Miranda's annual New Year's party. There's always food, drinks, and games. It's a fun night where we can get wasted, safe with family and friends if we wanted to, especially since there are no kids in the family at the moment. When I was returning from the bathroom, I saw Sean looking extremely uncomfortable and trying to fend off Mary, who was sitting much too close to him on the couch. I managed to overhear her telling him that women are much better than men and insisting he try with her because he didn't know what he was missing. Now, Sean is 100% gay, so this was just pathetic for her. But I was seeing red over the fact that she was attempting to ruin our marriage to satisfy her jealousy. I said, if women are so great, then date a woman instead of trying to get my gay husband to sleep with you. The entire room heard this. I didn't control my volume. Party ruined. The family has spared us from most of the chaos that followed, but today we found out that the money that was set aside for her is no longer for her. The tuition to pay for the remaining classes for her bachelor's degree has been refunded to our grandparents since spring classes haven't started yet. All the money from her parents is going to her younger brother, and all the money from our grandparents and Miranda is going to be distributed between him and myself. She's getting nothing. She's also been given 3 months to find a new place to live because her parents don't want her living under their roof. She was given a massive leg up, just like I was, and she screwed herself out of it. I almost feel sorry for her. Almost. Okay, I don't. Let's get some community comments. First up, by spared us from most of the chaos that followed, I assume that means you left the party. I wonder if she said some things that hurt other people too, hence the disinheritance. To be a fly on the wall of that room. DOP replies, yeah, we left. Sean was more than ready to go, and my dad was urging us to leave while my uncle was still managing to put a lid on his anger. I'm not really sure if she managed to get a word in, but this stunt of hers was the last straw. Someone else says, this is a mess around and find out of epic proportions, and you love to see it happen to the most deserving. Absolutely beautiful of your family to have your back like that too. Wish I read more of it. Someone else chimes in, wowzers. How many times has she been warned, counseled, and given ultimatums before they requested a refund on her university fees? She knew this was coming and still carried on. There's no way a reasonable family would just blindside her. So someone in the chain of command in your family said, hey, stop this crap or you will have to fend for yourself. And she decided to test how true that was. Lucky Sean, lucky you. Bless her. This feels like it was a long time coming, and like the comments say, she must have known this was coming. She's pushed too many buttons and she finally pushed the last one. I mean, why hit on someone who is A, clearly taken, and B, utterly and completely uninterested? It's unfortunate for her, but fortunate for you. You'd think someone who had their life set up financially would be on their best behavior considering where it was coming from. I guess she wasn't grateful for the handouts. Do you have a family member like this? What have they done? Share your stories with us in the comments below. Next up, entitled children and a funeral fruit basket. My grandpa's entitled children hid his death and tried to keep my Nana from her own husband's funeral. This is a story that happened a very long time ago, when I was around 19 years old, but I still haven't gotten over what a strange experience it was. My grandfather died when I was just a baby. When I was older, my Nana married a new man, a widower, who I called Grandpa Walt. He was the only maternal grandfather I knew, so I considered him my family. I didn't know this during that decade I knew him, but his kids from his previous marriage did not feel the same about my Nana. They did not believe in remarriage and considered her the most evil person in history for tempting their father from his vows to their deceased mother. They refused to see him in the home that my Nana owned, So when he got older and had difficulty leaving the house on his own, they mostly just stopped seeing him for years. He had never mentioned his kids, so I knew nothing about them. Eventually, he started getting bad enough that prolonged hospital stays were getting more frequent, and he needed to be in and out of full-time care. Whenever he was in the hospital, she would visit him until he could return home. They had been snowbirds, spending winters in Florida and summers in Michigan, but because of his health, they had not been able to go to their Florida home in many years. They decided that she would go down for a week or two to make sure the home was okay, and start the process of selling it before its value dropped from lack of maintenance while he was safely in full-time care with staff they had known and trusted for years. Then, they could use the money from the sale for his care. I went to visit him the day after he left, to make sure he was doing okay. His son and daughter were there. It was the first time I had ever seen them. I had barely even been aware of their existence, but I figured out who they were from context. I said hello and tried to introduce myself. They pretended as though I was invisible, and they hadn't heard anything. Like a child would do during a game when they pretended a sibling was a ghost. I awkwardly sat in a chair. They proceeded to stand there for over an hour, talking right in front of me to Grandpa Walt about how evil my Nana was. That she would abandon him in some dirty hospital. It was actually quite nice. And run off spending all his money partying in Florida like a gold-digging hussy. And how they hoped he would remember that when it came to his will. It should be noted that my Nana, while by no means wealthy, had a lot more money than he did. And all of their property was hers from decades before she ever met him. She was also an elderly woman with a hip replacement who used a walker. You know, the kind with yellow tennis balls on the legs. So she was in no condition to be partying in Miami or whatever they thought she was doing. He never once responded. He just stared straight ahead with glazed eyes. I wasn't sure if he even heard anything. He was not looking very well, but I knew he always had his ups and downs. So I didn't imagine anything was unusual. I was flabbergasted. Looking back, I wish I had spoken up. But I was a teenager in a hospital room full of sick and dying people, and I didn't know how to fight back without causing a huge scene. Eventually, I just took a brief pause in their rant to stand up and tell Grandpa Walt that I had to go, and that we all loved him, and his wife would be home soon after she took care of the house issues. The entitled son and daughter spoke to me for the first time, telling me I didn't need to come back because they would be there for him, and I was not his family. I rushed to my parents' house and told them what had happened, and they filled me in on their issues. And it seemed like even if they seemed awful, I knew it wasn't my place to try and keep them from their father. So I stayed away and gave them time to catch up, and hoped that when I wasn't there, they could actually catch up and figure out their relationship. A few days later, my Nana got a very strange call from the hospital. A nurse that she knew very well from Grandpa Walt's hospital called her and asked how she was. Nana said fine. The nurse then awkwardly asked, "Do you know?" My Nana asked, "Know what?" And the woman broke down. Grandpa Walt had been dead for 24 hours. His son and daughter had forbidden the hospital from contacting my Nana, and said they would let everyone know about the funeral arrangements. I have no idea what weird loophole caused higher-ups at the hospital to follow along with this, but his nurse sensed something was up and took a risk of calling to make sure my Nana knew. She did not. None of us did. They were attempting to hide his death and hurriedly hold a funeral before any of us found out. The nurse let us know where and when the funeral was taking place. Nana called all of us on the way to the airport to let us know. We started the phone tree for our whole family, and soon after she was back, and we were all on our way to the funeral. The look of rage and disgust we got when we walked into my own grandpa's funeral, that my Nana got for walking into her own husband's funeral, was terrifying. They glared angrily, and you could see that they wanted to scream and throw us out, but decided not to cause a scene. Instead, his daughter walked up and grabbed a fruit basket off the table. She announced that she was putting it in her car, and if any of her guests wanted fruit, they could ask her and she would go to the car to get it, because she didn't want just anyone eating her fruit. The son and daughter gave speeches about how their father was finally in heaven, back with his one true love, their mother, and finally free from those who tried to tear their love apart. The staff of the funeral home eventually clued into the weird dynamic and found a way to put my Nana's car in front of the procession, when neither of my Grandpa Walt's kids were looking, just to give her a brief moment of respect. She was pissed, but there was nothing she could do. These people thought their own opinions of the definition of "till death do us part" entitled them to hide my Nana's husband's death from her, hold their own funeral, and surely they spent days pressuring their father to cut her out of his will. I wish I could have seen their faces when they found out that none of the property they were salivating over was owned by him. It was a terrible, painful day for her to have to fight her way into her own husband's funeral. I was very sad, but I could not help but laugh at the fruit basket thing. It just came out automatically. It was the saddest, most petty, most evilly pathetic power grab I have ever seen. It's very bizarre that they didn't contact her grandma, even though she could have been the next of kin after Grandpa Walt's passing. And even with the funeral home, she should have been named in some form or the other when it came to arranging things like this. Not only that, but it seems fishy that your Grandpa Walt happened to die while his kids were down. and when they requested that no one else come to see him, one might suspect that they may have done something to him. It's not nice to think of, and hopefully they wouldn't go that far, but the timing just seems too coincidental. What do you think? Thank you for following along today in the rLounge. Before you go, be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. If you have something you want to share regarding today's content, we want to hear it. See you soon.